scale event that we have had since the pandemic, and we are so pleased to have this room filled and to see you all here. Today's event signifies a commitment to community formation, to the importance of developing a knowledgeable and engaged citizenry. The theme of Building Bridges was created to demonstrate the bridges between cultures, bridges between generations.
I hope that this film inspires people when they look at a building. They see something beyond those walls. They see something beyond the floor plans. They see something beyond just the structure of that building. They can recognize that architecture can often carry values and can express values and can help a community express their values. So I hope that people can see beyond the walls and beyond the blueprints. Growing up in Houston, studying in London, and teaching in Atlanta, three cities with some of the largest concentrations of Ismailis, I have had ample opportunities to explore the role of values in my identity as an Ismaili Muslim.
To me, values are the things which we hold dear to us, the things which bind us together as communities. So I think values are really those things which we shape our lives around and our communities around.
To me, what makes a good human being is underpinned by their values. The values of humility, tolerance, kindness.
For me, values are really about priorities as well. Values are things that help us to determine how to behave in this world and navigate the world around us. Without values, we'd kind of be like a ship unmoored, moving around the ocean, not sort of knowing which way to go. Values determine what priorities not just an individual has, but also what priorities a group can have. And oftentimes they can also be embodied in things such as buildings and architecture.
And values are the priorities that actually drive our ethics. So we might say, it's really important for us to be just in this world and to say, protect human life, but our values are in conversation with one another, and oftentimes we have to determine who or what is most important to prioritize in any given situation.
To me, values become valuable when they inspire and remind us that we are able to create change, able to make an impact, able to translate our beliefs into action. Built environments are a large part of that. We shape them and they shape us. His Highness the Aga Khan, the spiritual leader of the Ismaili community, said in his speech at the 2019 Aga Khan Award for Architecture ceremony, quote, "We shape our built environment and then our buildings shape us," unquote. For me, this is also true of values. We shape them and they shape us. So how do both of these, physical spaces and values, intersect? How do or how should our values show up in our physical spaces? In an ideal world, how would our built environment not only reflect our values, but give life to them? How can our spaces inspire us to actualize our value systems? The relationship between function and form is pivotal in architecture. Function describes the uses of a space, and form tells us what that space looks like in order to meet the functional needs. So, what role should our values play within this relationship? As an educator and a mentor to Ismaili American youth, these are the questions that I often challenge my students and myself to explore. This relationship between function, form, and values is beautifully exemplified in the Madinat al-Zahra Museum located in Cordoba, Spain. As part of a field trip while studying at the Institute of Ismaili Studies, my classmates and I were given a tour of the archaeological site along with its museum. The function of the museum is for visitors to learn about and interpret the excavations of this historic palace city. The form of the museum undoubtedly serves this function, but the set of architectural values is what makes this project unique.
L'espace d'interprétation du site est orangé en harmonie parfaite avec le paysage et l'architecture arabe. Comme point de départ, les architectes sont partis des plans au sol de 3 bâtiments mis au jour, comme si le musée avait attendu d'être découvert. Le concept est de simuler une fouille archéologique, incorporant particulièrement des éléments de l'architecture islamo-andalouse interprétés grâce à une écriture moderne.
Rather than towering over the 10th century structure that the museum is supposed to showcase, the museum's humble design seeks to learn from the site and then share that knowledge with its visitors, symbolizing the value of intellectual humility. The worldwide Ismaili Centers can also be said to embody this concept. First conceived in the late 1970s, the Ismaili Centers continue the tradition of the Jamatkhana, which is the place of prayer and gathering for the Ismaili Muslim community. The Ismaili Centers are representational buildings, incorporating the Jamatkhana and furthering the community's emphasis on core values such as civic engagement, pluralism, and education. There are currently 6 centers worldwide, with the 7th center under construction in Houston, Texas. The first of its kind, the Ismaili Center London, has a social hall designed to house a series of alcoves to facilitate dialogue and community support. This is a key component of the Ismaili community. The value of one Jamaat, Jamaat meaning community, is emphasized through the space itself. Nadim Babani is an Ismaili who grew up in London. He speaks to the values that are conveyed through the design of the Ismaili Center in his home city.
And so I think with Jamaat Khanas as spaces of worship and gathering, they reflect the values of the community, I think, in 2 ways. One of them is through the actual spaces that the Ismaili Centers or the Jamaat Khanas include in their design. The second is the design, the architectural design of those spaces. So the symbolism in the architecture of those spaces, which embodies certain values. For me as a child, I placed immense value, like many children, on my friend circle, my friendships. And I think the way the Ismaili Center London was designed allowed that value, which was so dear to me, to be nurtured. It allowed me and my friends to come and build those relationships, to build those friendships. I think with the value of prayer, as I grew a little bit older, I would find peace in the design of the building, in the way that the prayer hall has been designed, with these wonderful teardrop lights that fall from the ceiling, and the symbol of light being very powerful in the Islamic tradition. That idea would always be very resonant with me. And so the value of faith, the value of enlightenment, the value of seeking illumination, light which guides us, would always be something that deeply connected with me as I grew older. And I felt that the Ismaili Center London, again, through its wonderful design and use of light as a medium of promoting or cultivating a certain sentiment within the human being, I felt it allowed me to nurture and cultivate that value of seeking enlightenment, of seeking prayer, of seeking strength and courage in my, soul rather than in the surroundings that I lived within.
My personal outlook on values, that they should be coupled with action, combined with my role as a teacher to Ismaili American youth, has inspired me to look for concrete ways in which my students can see, hear, and feel their values being put into action by those around them, in hopes that this would inspire them to do the same. My hope is that the Ismaili Center Houston will serve as a unique inspiration to my students. This will be the first of its kind in the United States, and Texas has been chosen for the center partly because of the large number of Ismailis who live here. This center will add to the repertoire of architecture that responds to the values and the needs of the communities which it serves. These structures, called the tolerance sculptures, overlook the site of Ismaili Center Houston. Sitting alongside Buffalo Bayou Park in downtown Houston, each of these 7 sculptures depict kneeling human forms, with characters and symbols from 9 different languages. I think architecture can certainly be a landmark. I think this is a landmark, and by that I mean it leaves a mark. It leaves a mark on the city of Houston. It leaves a mark on the people who engage with it. It can even leave a mark on how you think about the world, right? Like your worldview. The sculptures further illustrate the marriage between values and physical structures. Absolutely. I think architecture, whether it be a built space or a structure like this, can certainly send a message. And in this case, I think the message is the value of pluralism. Not just diversity, but what are you doing to engage with that diversity in a positive way? I think the tolerance sculptures truly exemplify how architecture, whatever form or shape it takes, can serve as a vehicle to share with the world one's values, whether it be the values of the person creating it or the community for whom it's being created. Bringing to life this relationship is the architect of Ismaili Center Dushanbe, Farooq Nur Muhammad.
The architecture that we do and the values that architecture reflects are the values of what you want to inspire into those buildings in a particular setting, in a particular time, in a particular context.
Farooq describes how the 5 pillars in the Bamiri house, which were once a private expression of faith for the Tajik Jamaat, inspired the design of this center.
We talk about the values for the Tajik Jamaat. The Tajik Jamaat has been deprived of a Jamatkhana for many, many centuries. So when we talk about those 5 columns that used to be a private expression within the Bamiri house, and now we bring it to the Ismaili Center. Ismaili Center is a huge big building, and the 5 columns basically rise out of this building and really symbolically hold up the roof, which is really the skies, symbolically. So basically really saying that these 5 columns that we were afraid to express what they were, now we can publicly say that these are, we were thinking of the Panchtan, and it's a statement of who we are as an Ismaili community, which basically values the family of the Prophet.
While learning about how Farooq and his team designed Ismaili Center Dushanbe with the values of the local community in mind, in heart, and in hand, I couldn't help but envision how Ismaili Center Houston might accomplish something similar. What role could value-guided architecture play in this project? Dr. Zara Jamal, a fellow member of the ICH education team, describes how certain areas within a space can truly illuminate our values.
And those are spaces like libraries and conference rooms, exhibition spaces, classrooms, lounges, social halls, etc. And I think in many ways, each of them embody and facilitate through their programming values like knowledge, like pluralism, and like service.
The Ismaili Center Houston education team curated an example around the value of knowledge, which is central in Islam and subsequently an important value for many Muslims worldwide. Rizwan Mawani, another member of the education team, discusses the role of emotive experiences in such spaces.
And oftentimes that feeling of humility, that feeling of awe, that feeling of gratitude that one feels when one enters a space comes into effect because you are in conversation with that architecture.
Rizwan and Nadim have both reminded us that the conversation between one's spirit and their surroundings is pivotal. This is often illuminated through the prayer halls found in Jamatkhana's and Ismaili Centers worldwide. As we reflect on the relationship between the values of a community and the design elements of its most important spaces, let's hear from the architect of Ismaili Center Houston herself, Farshid Mousavi, regarding her plans to illuminate this relationship.
What is special about the site is that it has quite a large footprint, and only one side of it is enclosed. 3 sides of the site are open to passing traffic. These avans, by being open on all sides and visible from distances, will enable social and cultural gatherings to occur throughout the year, and they will mark the building as an open destination. We can imagine gatherings such as book fairs, markets, outdoor exhibitions, or, for example, outdoor learning events. They will render the Ismaili Center as open and inviting in every direction.
I think in so many ways it shows how Islam is a lived faith, and that it doesn't end in the prayer hall. It's what you do in everyday life, how you take care of your body, mind, and soul, how you take care of others around you, your family, your coworkers and colleagues, your neighbors and strangers, how you privilege education and health and justice, right? Helping the weakest, the most marginalized, to improve their quality of life, to enable them to live with dignity and self-reliance.
And some of my fondest and earliest memories of Jamatkhana is, of course, they're related to these beautiful buildings that I visited and prayed in all over the world. But many of them are also about these informal spaces in which I formed friendships as a young child, in which I was educated in a corner of a building, not in a dedicated classroom. It's because it's in those moments that a community is built. It's in those moments that our values are most embodied and made apparent to even a young mind.
As Farshid, Rizwan, and Zara remind us, while value-guided architecture can certainly lead us to a place of inspiration, it is ultimately the duty and the privilege of the people who are using the space to act on their inspiration and to carry out their values.
What do you want this building to be, for not just for us now, but for generations to come?
I think of it as things happening in the building rather than the building itself, because it's that kind of building. It has a lot of soul already. Mm-hmm. I would like to imagine that, as I mentioned, that great ideas will be born in this building. Mm-hmm. Because, we build the ideas, we make the ideas. Yeah. And this is one of those kinds of buildings that is made for this kind of thing. It's not just a place we go and work like an office. It's not a place say like a museum where we go and view the work of others. Here we go and make things.
One thing that's important for us to remember is even though we have these beautiful built spaces, we shouldn't neglect that ultimately it's the people who use those spaces in which community is built. It's our relationships with each other, our coming together, the conversations that we have. It's very easy to become attached to a space because it's beautiful, but we shouldn't become attached to the space at the consequence of losing that glue that we have with each other as a community.
To me, values are the things which we hold dear.
To me, what
Values determine what
Our values are in conversation with one another, and oftentimes we have to determine.
As we consider the spaces around us, let us reflect on how they can inspire us to give life to our values. How can our actions, our interactions, and the places in which these occur shape how we engage with the world? How can I inspire my students to use the spaces around them to give life to their values? How should we raise and teach our youth so that they too can create a world built on values?